Thank you. Welcome to Nicodemus at Night.
Oh, thank you. I'm honored to have been asked and invited.
Absolutely. So that you know, Nicodemus at Night is where I would like to create a space where we can have conversations that absolutely need to happen that have not been happening. Looking at the intersection of where faith meets culture, meets social justice, meets social action. And because of your expertise, subject matter expertise, in dealing with the black prison pipeline, I want to have what will probably be the first of many conversations with you on this. But I want to first start with what's happening with our young kids. So let's say, well, you know the history better. I always want to say third grade, but you know it starts even before that. So, but first, can you give us what got you into this research? And let's just kind of get started with that.
Sure. What really got me into the research is that I believe the biggest and most serious problem that faces the African American community today, systemic problem, is mass incarceration. I've talked about this a lot, that the United States incarcerates 25% of the world's prison population, even though we only make up 5% of the world's population in total. And the only thing more disturbing and striking than the size of our prison population is its racial disparity. That African Americans make up 12 to 13% of the U.S. population, but upwards of 41% of the U.S. prison population. So we have nearly 1 million black people in prison, and more than that in jails and prison when you think about people that are just arrested and awaiting trial. So that is, to me, one of the most, if not the most serious issues that black people face in this country as a systemic issue. And it starts with the way we begin to mold and educate our children. There is actually a school to prison pipeline that dictates how prisons are going to be built in the future based on test scores of literally of black children in second and third grade. So, and it should be our national shame.
Right.
It really should be. We, as a country, no country has incarcerated such a large number of a single ethnic group since the Germans in the 1930s were putting Jews in concentration camps. We actually incarcerate more black people by number and by percentage than South Africa did during apartheid.
So let's just sit on that.
Yeah.
Because South Africa then was roughly 80 to 90, 85% black.
Yes.
And so it seems to me what we're really talking about is a crime against humanity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It should be our moral shame. We should be hauled before the world court for this.
And see, I'm a big fan of Eleanor Roosevelt. So it's one of our citizens who helped co-author the UN Charter of Human Rights.
Right.
And yet when it comes to this particular thing, we want to talk about the shame of China with the Muslims. And yeah, it is. I don't want to, but we need to first look in our own backyard.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We talk about China. We talk about how the Uyghurs were treated. We had, I personally, when I was in college, slept 2 days on the president's lawn of the university at Rutgers.
So, Stephen Biko.
1977 is when he was killed, and it was September of 77. It was the week before school started at Rutgers. And we went from a group of about 30 to a group of about 200 that spent the night on the president's lawn in front of his office, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. On Monday, they called an emergency board of governors meeting, and they voted to divest. It was the first real political action that I had ever been involved in. We were on TV, and my mother was calling, like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "I'm fine."
I mean, but congratulations. I'm about to pivot somewhere. But that is what a Democrat, a republic founded on Democratic values expects of its citizens. It seems to me, and this is coming from me, even my life as a father, that education systems are now made to put all students in a oneness box. Sit down, sit still, and rote memory, regurgitate back. And that's not how we were made.
No.
And so how does that, even in the setting up the pedagogy of a school district, also even before you get to that second, third grade testing, start even leading there when it comes to especially black boys, but black children?
It's hard to say because this is something that white parents recognize. And just culturally, just think about it, and we used to say this all the time, we used to see kids out in public spaces, restaurants or stores or something, and, you know, without generalizing, you'd see white kids that were allowed to run around the stores and do that. And our parents were like, you aren't allowed to do that.
Right.
And I have just personally witnessed white kids saying things to their parents that would have gotten me killed, that would have caused me to kill my own child. It's just that, so they understand on a broad basis the need for expression and for freedom of curiosity. And so I'm not sure that all of the school systems are built like that. I think particularly in urban areas where control and security are a bigger part of seem to be a bigger concern for the students than necessarily the broadness of education. That's where that's practiced. I don't think that's something that's done consistently across the board, and certainly not in private schools, and not even in all public schools.
Okay, I went to private schools myself. And for university, I finished at Antioch. And they did a study that saying about 80% of we have 4 classes of levels of schooling in public education. The bottom 2 is just teaching people how to work in a factory. And I think that's still true, but I also think, and I think maybe I was being too broad, so you're correct, that we see white kids more times than not get the assistance of IEPs, get the assistance of correct diagnosis or special needs,
Yes.
and other work, whereas for our kids, they get discipline.
Right.
And it's suspensions, and, you know, it's not restorative justice. There's nothing that is restoring or learning, but we're kicked to the side, and then black parents all too often are said, are not interested as parents.
Right, which we know personally to be just a ball of hooey since I'm in a church.
Thank you. But when I look at the root of that school pipeline, it looks like, and really want you to run from this, we have kids who, some of them really need an IEP, need special services, who don't get it, and then are in the back of the class, so this feeling of not belonging is starting to take place in the kindergarten first place. Then they start getting standardized tests, which at least for us start in 3rd grade. If they're not scoring well, take over. If they're not scoring well, I'm not even going to complete my sentence, I'm just going to leave it to you.
Right, if they're not scoring well, they're going to be guided down a path that's going to, like you said, lead them to some sort of manual vocational training, which, okay, there's nothing wrong with vocational training. We had a high school in Chicago called Chicago Vocational that was stellar, but this was, I grew up in the 60s, they had auto shops, I mean, literal auto shops, where they're lifting cars on, on the hydraulics and repairing cars and air conditioners and things like that. But a couple of things. One, the manufacturing jobs that, propelled the middle class in the 50s and 60s have largely gone abroad. And secondly, even when we had them, unions were,
Yes, but let's be more clear. They didn't go abroad.
they were sent abroad.
The business owners fired the Americans
Yes.
and reopened the same number in, right to work law countries that did not
Yes.
treat their citizens well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It wasn't just some benign
Yeah.
occurrence. Yeah, that was done deliberately. But when we're talking about how we're putting kids in categories, they're being pushed to that, and then we're also putting a lot of kids, especially in the cities, in schools where something that you used to do that would get you sent to the principal's office, now there's a security officer or a control officer, which is a police officer at the school, who will literally put this child into juvenile detention, will arrest them for incorrigibility, for having a fight. If everybody in my grammar school got arrested for fighting, we wouldn't have anybody there. So, I mean, it's not just that the system is being set up educationally, it's being set up socially. And the attitude of a lot of teachers, and I think teachers are the most underpaid profession in the United States, is a triage mentality. I've got 30 kids in the school. I know these 10 kids here can make it if I work with them, concentrate on them. So I'm going to build the curriculum around them, and the rest of them either catch up, or what can I do? Where's my time better spent?
See, there's two things that'll go. Antidote and the next question. Antidote. Private schools here in LA and other major cities, they have 2 full-time teachers in a class of about 20.
Yeah.
And it's the expectation that every teacher knows where every child is. And they teach specifically, like, they may have a broad lesson. For the kids who are a little bit more struggling, they'll call them opportunities or what not even struggles. They do what's appropriate for them. For the people who need to go deeper, they go much deeper. They try to keep, especially with a younger kid who can go faster, they try to still keep them around their age group. So they aren't even seeing the differences as much, and they're around their own. But since this is church, what I really felt when you were talking last was our school system is creating a sense, so I said earlier break and belonging, but that's the wrong word, it's nihilism. The matter that, the thing that I don't matter.
Yes.
And nothing matters, so if we're gonna make a criminal that I'm only gonna live for right now because I probably won't get it if I wait, the sense of I have to take care of myself and it doesn't matter what others think.
Right.
Which we know can lead, just in the mentality you're gonna step outside of normative behavior, agree to different normative behavior, which absolutely can lead to prisons.
Sure.
But from what we're saying, that nihilism is starting in K-1 too.
That nihilism starts with the attitudes of the people that are governing the system. And I don't want to focus or over-focus on northern urban centers like you and I grew up in Chicago and D.C., because most black people in this country live in the South. Except for D.C., the top 5 places, percentage-wise, that African Americans live: Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and I think South Carolina.
Which are in one line.
One line, that's it.
Yep.
And a lot of them live in rural or suburban, I won't call them suburban, but suburban areas that are concentrated. And the same kind of, and maybe even worse kinds of systemic issues occur in those schools as they do in schools in Chicago and South LA, because the system driven by the state through the county to the local areas has both resources and just general practices have been catered to the white majority, and they're an afterthought.
And even in some places, not even a white majority, like Jackson, Mississippi,
Right.
where they don't have potable water. I mean,
Right.
just drinkable water.
Exactly.
But you're supposed to be in school. You can't drink water. And everything else that goes along with that.
Exactly.
It's a hot place. We're in the middle of heat, severe heat wave, and they know heat already.
Right.
But you can't drink water.
Can't
You
drink
have to-
water, no air conditioning.
No air conditioning.
Yeah.
And so how are you supposed to be a student? And I can imagine what their textbooks look like. And it not only is it building that, starting to put the places in the kid's mind of I don't matter, but it dehumanizing, decivilizing. I don't know what the right even words to start.
Sure.
We can now see why people act the way they do. And not only their distrust of the system, but not willing to listen to people of our generation.
Right.
Where holding out the delayed gratification did pay off.
And we fought these battles already. I mean, I just listened to an interview of Minnie Jean Brown, who was one of the Little Rock Nine, and the experience that she had integrating Little Rock Central High School. That was 60 years, over 60 years ago. In fact, it was, what year is that, 1955?
55.
That they integrated, so
Yes.
almost 70 years ago. We've been fighting this battle forever. And it's not as if and our children, as we did growing up, now my son went to, they went to a very good high school, same high school that Michelle Obama went to, but it was a magnet school. So in some cities, there are certain schools that they get protected and chosen, and that's where, the talented 10th can matriculate through those.
Right.
But our children see the difference in resources. I mean, if you play on a basketball team, I can remember the first time we went and played in the north suburbs against them. And we had a gym. They had a field house. They had
Right.
an arena.
Right.
Okay.
They weren't just kind of cracking the window open.
Right, no, we're walking around this thing. This is like 1973, and I'm walking around this thing thinking, my God, I thought this is what college basketball was going to look like. They're playing high school basketball here. And it's the swimming pools and everything else. And it just amazes me that we have allowed this to happen. And not only us, but poor whites have allowed it to happen, because they've been allowed to stay in the club that, well, you're not black. But I don't know if you've read Heather McGhee's book, The Sum of Us, and she starts out with the story of how, rather than integrate public pools, which were huge, beautiful, large social gathering places in not just the South, but mostly the South, rather than integrate them when they were ordered to by the federal government, empty them and paved them over.
Yep.
So nobody got a pool. And then they had these private clubs for certain kids. But there were poor whites that weren't able to get into those, and none of the black folks were able to get into them. And it's just a public facility, a public good that's lost. They would literally rather not have you there and not have it at all.
And we know that poor whites in the country, Appalachia, Oklahoma, some of the places, my heart goes out to them. And indigenous peoples.
Mm-hmm.
They are living in third world country on the reservation.
Right.
So although my concern and my focus on this is the black prison, my only concern is not that. It's a structural reform. Right. When Bobby Kennedy, running for president, went to Harlem, not Manhattan, Harlem, Uptown, the poor black child, that's not when all these reforms came and we passed more laws for people. It's when Bobby Kennedy went to Appalachia.
Right.
Right. But what the world's not seeing is a poor child, a hungry child, a child in need.
No.
The
point I was going to make is they're willing to do that because of the black community, because they are unwilling to allow the descendants of formerly enslaved people to realize full humanity. And that has been the case since Reconstruction ended. That they never ever envisioned a truly multicultural society where black people and white people were going to coexist.
And that's where Trump fit in. I know, but if we're gonna name it,
yes,
there's nothing about him that speaks of a populist. There's nothing.
There's a gold toilet.
Yes. So what he talked to, and people are so gullible to want to belong in the world. Like part of the American empire right now is you don't get to belong with us unless you have the most. Even though the system is set up where it's going to have its foot on your neck.
Right. And this country has, the number of billionaires that we have. And if you consider the difference between what a CEO of a company makes and a barista at Starbucks makes, there's no excuse for that. But there's even less excuse for the difference between what a CEO of a major corporation makes and a public school teacher makes.
Right.
Because this person has gone to college, is a professional, is doing a public good, and is not only not being compensated for it, is barely being recognized for it. Whereas we have built this masters of the universe kind of mentality around, Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and these people who just amassed billions while literally exploiting the people that work for them. That's especially true of Amazon, which I happen to use regularly, unfortunately.
I think all of us, let me just say this and then I'm going to do two quick things. Steve Jobs at his death had no one. He had money, but he drove everyone away. There's an old Russian masterful book, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, who talked about, where he got to reflect on the end of his life, what life was really about. And it's something that as Christians, we know that if you live right, you will have friends and family holding your hands when you get to meet the Lord.
Yes.
Also, I want to end on a different note that I'm not heavily prepared for because we need to have you back a few times.
Okay.
We're barely scratching the surface. But I'm sure you wrote Paulo Freire, The Pedagogy of Hope. I think that in this conversation and in the work that you do, hope has to play a central role because if you look at what you said to us, and I'm getting moved. If you look at what you said, systems are created and designed to hold our people down, not just us, but people who on the economic level, socioeconomic level look at it, but we're being divided because people don't want to see, poor white person, poor black person, poor Asian person, as poor. They want to look at color.
Right.
They want to put something black in one box, put brown something, but they can get very intricate, but they put black and brown in the box. More so than some of the other communities in this country. You see that, and we haven't gotten into this, private prisons where they're making money, police in schools where they're not trained to deal with grown-ups who are not in their right mind, let alone kids.
Right.
This needs to be a principal and the school counselor.
Exactly.
And so where does hope play in? Where do you keep your hope? Because this can also drive you crazy.
It does. One of my favorite quotes is by Angela Davis. And she says, what would it be like if we imagined a system of justice where punishment wasn't the first concern? And our systems now, we talk about racism, and this is the game they're playing with words. Like, well, so and so isn't racist, so and so is not a racist. Trump is a racist, but but you can't look into his heart. I don't have to look into his heart and see his actions.
Right.
But even if there was not another racist left in the United States, even if every person was in their hearts not a racist, this system is running on automatic pilot. It was put in place and put in motion, and now you don't need someone with a nefarious mindset to actually be running it. I don't believe that everybody that's running the criminal justice system is a racist. Doesn't matter. They can't help it. They're running a system that was built on racism. I mean, if you're the governor or the secretary of the interior, and your responsibility is managing, monitoring, and controlling Native American reservations, you don't have to be a racist. It's a racist system by design. Right. So the criminal justice system, our education system, these are things that have been put in place by people who now just have it running. My hope is that, and it takes a long time, that we begin to see and separate bigotry from racism. Racism, institutional racism that is systemic, that happens because things have been built and things have been designed in a way that will oppress one people, or at least keep one group of people well behind another group of people, or just completely excluded from, with the few exceptions that come through. I mean, I was very good in school, and I went to an all-black elementary school. Didn't go to high school with anyone that wasn't black. I mean, didn't go to school with anyone that wasn't black until I got to high school. I wasn't special. I have a lot of friends that I went to elementary school with who did not have necessarily the same parents that I did. We all grew up in the same community, and a lot more of us probably did better than are coming from similar communities now because of the way we were segregated, and I'll talk about that a lot later. But it didn't make me special. It just made me one of the few that actually slipped through the system. And when I got to high school and started going to school with white students, and realized that no, despite what they're not better students than me. They're not smart. When I got to college, where I was, we were 7% of the population there, I was even less impressed with the people that I was competing with. So, and I realized not only was I able to compete with them, that there are a lot of guys I know, a lot of girls I know back on the south side of Chicago who should be here and should be over at Princeton and up at NYU and down at Georgetown and all these places where I know that there are very few of us. We should be here. I think that's why my children's generation, my son's generation, they have really embraced the idea of going to HBCUs, because they don't just want to feel tolerated, they want to feel celebrated. And that's a different kind of system. And that's a system we need to try to make for all students.
I thank you. I have since year 8. My wife and son are on the plane, or about to get on the plane right now to go to D.C. My parents are right around the corner from Howard. And Theodore is going to be without his parents, just with his grandparents, right around the corner from Howard. And you know they're going to be playing their music. The band is probably going to get them working out. So he's going to hear all that and feel that.
Yes.
And on that note, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Now I would like to have you back because we haven't talked about teenagers.
Love to come back.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Can't wait. Thank you.
Thank you.